worried, and the man reported that the emperor was calling the duke to him. His Highness replied that they had no right to keep the emperor waiting. Compared to the Northern Empire where Cassian came from, the local lands are much more fertile and rich. However, all these merits were due to only one man, the master of the sword, Revelgos, the shield of the Western Empire. Throughout history, only 100 men have been awarded the knowledge of a master of the sword. In addition, most of the sword masters were from the Western Empire, who were always loyal to their homeland. Moreover, he saved his country from destruction. Cassian was eager to meet the swordsman in person, who, after so many accomplishments, gave no reason to doubt his greatness. But the emperor only smiled in response, because it was almost impossible to meet the master of the sword. After all, he did not come even when the emperor called him personally. The emperor added that the swordmaster was ignoring even the emperor's orders. Then he added that the boy should not think that he was speaking to the master. He was just that kind of person. The emperor himself almost lost control of his emotions, because he knew that the master of the sword was Lady Arna, and if it was known in other countries, then the Duchess would simply be mad about it. The Duchess was always in a bad mood for her daughter's constant opposition to her marriage. And who would marry a girl who was famous among the people as a master of the sword? A commotion distracted Cassian from his thoughts. He turned his head and saw how the Duchess had found his cat after all, and was dragging her by the ear to give her a good rub. Cassian looked in their direction with a dreamy look and thought that his wiry cat had been caught after all. The emperor himself distracted him from his thoughts. Cyclone IV proposed to His Highness to return to the conversation about arranging a marriage between their countries. Then the emperor asked if the duke had already liked someone among the local girls. In fact, this ball was arranged so that Sir Cassian would find himself the most worthy match, which would contribute to the establishment of harmony between the Western and Northern empires. The emperor asked if the young man already had someone on his notice, and Cassian said thoughtfully that he didn't even know. His Highness thought for a moment. The girl's status was not important to Cassian. The main thing was that she fit all the criteria. And if she is an interesting person, it will be even better. An image of his cat immediately appeared in his head. Then Cassian took out the order that the girl had given him when she said goodbye, and promised to return and thank the duke. Therefore, he put the order on the table and said that it was a thing of a girl who liked it. The emperor was almost speechless. The coat of arms of the House of Arna lay on the table in front of him. Meanwhile, the duke only added that he would happily marry the young lady to whom this thing belonged. The peak of the military strength of the Western Empire, its savior hero, who was respected by every inhabitant of the country, was Lady Arni, and she was also the head of the Order of the Golden Dragon, on whose shoulders was the entire defense of the country. That's the kind of person Arni was built, the most respected swordsman. But despite all her merits and regalia, this belligerent young girl remained a daughter. Before going to bed, a mother visited her room, who was trying her best to persuade her disobedient daughter to marry a worthy duke from the northern kingdom. She thought that at home, she remained only a naughty daughter, who was trying to push some man. Arna was wandering somewhere in her thoughts until her mother sternly asked if she was listening to her. The young girl thought that she could just jump out of the window and her torment would be over. Meanwhile, the mother continued to praise her next defendant. The Duchess said that the count from the neighboring empire was simply wonderful, and that he was destined for the girl by fate itself. All her peers have long known the joy of marriage, because love is simply wonderful. The girl furrowed her brows and waited for her mother to talk and leave her alone. But today, their conversation dragged on longer than usual. Therefore, she mentally distorted all her mother's sentences. Then the mother asked her daughter if she knew what nickname she was given in society. Arna asked if he could be a swordsman, and his mother said no. Then the girl assumed that the hero was a savior. The mother again said that her daughter did not guess. And Arna thought more carefully about her nickname. After thinking a little, it occurred to the young girl that she was called a mad dog, and the mother added that not just a rabid dog, but the emperor's rabid dog. Arna thought that sounded pretty good. The Duchess complained to Arna that even if she ever started talking about an engagement, all the boys just ran away because Arna once spanked them all. And Arnie just said that they were all weaklings. That's why they got paid for nuts by the girl. The angry Duchess slapped her naughty daughter on the back because she didn't know how else to talk to her. The Duchess fell exhausted into a chair and said that she only wanted her daughter to be happy, which is why she insisted on getting married as soon as possible. Offended, Arna looked at her mother and tearfully asked if a woman's happiness consisted only in marriage. The mother replied that, of course, every woman has her own happiness. The mother did not know what other arguments to give, so she simply told Arna to live as she knew. But her heart bleeds when she sees how her daughter cannot find love. Arnie looked at her mother and repeated the word love in her mind, but she didn't say anything to her, and it didn't resonate in her heart. A word as a word. But the mother decided to bring her conversation to the end and informed her daughter that a suitable partner had already been chosen for her. The emperor himself took care of it. Confused, Arna shouted, "Who else do they want to introduce to her?" And the mother informed that her fiancé's name is the Duke of Turnagain from the Northern Empire. The Duchess also said that if rumors are to be believed, he is the first groom in the Northern Empire. Every lady would be lucky to marry such a rich, handsome man. And Arna simply exploded with emotions. She cried out, how dare they marry her off to a foreigner? And the mother shouted back that no one in their country wanted to marry Arna. That disobedient daughter did not even want to listen to her mother's arguments and shouted that she would not marry a man she had never even seen for anything in the world. The mother said that who would marry her if not this young man? And she calmly added that her daughter should try to just meet him, and that way they would understand whether they fit each other or not. The Duchess also added that the ladies would be dazzled by his beauty. And isn't it a blessing to be married to such a handsome man? But Arna only angrily shouted for her mother to stop this chatter. That was the end of the conversation. But every day, at the right opportunity, the mother constantly reminded Arne that this union would be simply incredible for everyone, both for the countries and for the young people themselves. And a week passed, and the mother did not stop telling what a skilled knight the Duke was, and he also came from a noble family. And when 2 weeks of these endless persuasions had passed, the mother very much begged to fulfill her last request and marry that Duke. Arna no longer had the strength to argue every day. On the same day, Arnie agreed to look at her fiancé only so that the annoying mother would get away from her and not bother her daughter with talks about that damn Duke. On the day of the examination, thoughts in Arna's head were just raging. She could not realize that she would marry a foreigner, and that too in another country. She lived alone and was happy until today. The mother could not stop and constantly told them what a beautiful daughter they had, and how these clothes fit her, and what beautiful jewels complemented her fabulous image. The mother drove her daughter because she thought that the Duke of Turnagain was already waiting for them. But Arna looked at her mother with a disbelieving look, and she had no desire to go to this betrothed. In Arna's head, which amused the young girl at least a little, she thought that she could easily make that Duke refuse to marry at all. The maid informed the ladies that the meeting with the Duke would take place in the reception room, in this very room. Arna looked around and began to examine the Duke's beautifully decorated room. Arna displeasedly asked her mother if she had to accompany Arna here as well. The Duchess replied that her father and the Duke would soon be here. Arna thought for a moment that what she came up with would be complete suicide for her. But the prospect of marrying a stranger was even less appealing. The Duchess chatted cheerfully with the maid, praising the local interior, and the maid informed that the Duke was personally furnishing the entire castle. Arnie went to the window and decided that she simply had no other way out. Because from minute to minute, His Highness will appear here, and her will come to a final end. The young girl opened the window and cautiously looked at her mother and maid. They did not pay attention to the girl and just talked. Arna decided to simply run away from this engagement. The Duchess was the first to hear how a fresh wind blew from the street, and a terrible thought flashed through her head. The woman simply did not want to even think about such a thing. But when the women turned their heads in the direction of fresh air, they saw an empty room and an open window. The Duchess's eyes nearly popped out of surprise and shame for her daughter. The enraged Duchess shouted the name of her disobedient daughter and gripped her fan so furiously that it cracked and broke in two. She did not expect such a reason from her daughter on the day of the examinations. Meanwhile, confused, Arna looked around and looked into the open window. There was no way back. The young girl looked at the garden in which she found herself and thought about what she should do next. Then Arna heard the sound of hooves and turned her head. She saw a carriage approaching this castle. The girl decided to come closer. A moment later, the young girl was already running to the carriage. She decided to use the cruise services for a short time to get away from this cursed place. She ran to the door and grabbed the door handle. A young man inside heard someone trying to get inside the carriage. But when the door of the carriage opened, both young people were shocked by what they saw. They never expected to see each other under such circumstances. For the first few minutes, they just stared at each other in silence. The first to speak was Cassian, who said he was glad to see his stray cat again. They just said the word, "you." Arna heard someone shouting loudly for her to stay where she was and not to move. The young girl turned her head in fear and saw her angry mother. Arnie simply had no choice, and she resolutely climbed into the carriage and sat opposite the young man. Because if her angry mother caught up with her, she would flay her in front of everyone. The young duke just looked at his cat and was amazed by her determination. She attracted him even more when she acted so impulsively. Arnie only apologized for the inconvenience and said that they could go on. The bullets were headed for it. Cassian had only told the young woman that she looked as if she was trying to escape from an unwanted marriage. The angry girl just gave him an incredulous look. His Highness only added that she could use the young man, if, of course, she wished it, and there was some necessity for it. In the head of the confused girl, only questions arose. Why this young man always happens to her at the most dangerous moment and offers his help. Arnie also thought that maybe he was some kind of fraud, and what would he ask in exchange for her request? But Cassian saw the girl's hesitation and said that he did not need anything in return for help. At first she thought he read her mind. Then she guessed that maybe he was just curious and should take advantage of this opportunity, especially if he wasn't asking for anything in return. She thought a little and said that she would agree to accept the young man's help. Cassian just smiled back and said it was just great. The young girl nevertheless dared and asked the young man to pretend to be her young boyfriend just for one day. His Highness smiled with satisfaction and said that he would accept this request as an honor for himself and would gladly play along with the young lady. Meanwhile, the carriage slowly moved away and the young people went on their way. She had no idea where they were going, but she didn't care as long as they were away from her fiancé. After a few minutes, the young girl still wondered where they were going, so she asked the young man about it. And he, without thinking for a long time, said that they were going on a date. Arn's face changed. She looked at the young man with such a look that she wanted to kill him. Her eyes read only the question of what the hell is a date. Cassian smiled and explained that she herself had asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend, which was why they were going on a date. Then the young man added that they should show the whole world that they are a real couple. At these words, Arna thought that it looked like he was already bending the stick to the whole world. But Cassian had his iron argument on this matter. He explained that if rumors spread that she has a lover, then the engagement will definitely be postponed. After listening to all the arguments of the young man, Arna agreed that it was just a brilliant idea, and this is how they could break this silence forever. A satisfied smile spread across the young man's face. When the carriage stopped, Cassian invited the young lady to go with him to the cafe. He ordered a dessert and explained to the girl that it was a very famous dessert in this empire. Cassian noticed with his side vision that the audience had already begun to whisper. These girls already recognized that Lady Arnie was sitting next to him and began to thoroughly wash her bones. Even the girls couldn't recognize what kind of handsome man was next to Arna and decided to just go up and ask. Meanwhile, Arna was looking at the amazing dessert. She was not used to sweets. The young girl was used to hard battles, but not at all to delicacies. So after the first bite, she was so enraptured by the taste that she even closed her eyes with pleasure. The young man noticed that Arna had a piece of dessert left on his lips, so he asked the young woman if she wanted to be informed about her new young man sooner. Arna did not have time to react to this question and give his answer, as the hand of his Highness reached to her lips and he took a piece of dessert that was there. Then he put that piece in his mouth and said that this dessert was truly unsurpassed and that the rumors were not lying, praising it on all sides. Cassian smiled at the young girl and said that this was the quickest way to tell everyone that they were a couple. Those present, who kept their eyes on the young couple, already began to whisper, but Arna was not laughing. She was just raging. The only thing pulsating in his head was the thought of what a jerk he was making in front of everyone present. As they said goodbye at the gate, Arna thanked the young man for today, and he replied with satisfaction